First, want to welcome everyone to today's webinar. We are very excited about our guest speaker today. My name is Michelle Beebe. I am the Director of Training Services at the Change Companies. We provide evidence-based solutions for behavior change using interactive journaling, and for the last 30 plus years, we've been supporting our clients in delivering the best behavior change programming to the people that they serve. Today we have, as I mentioned, a special guest to walk us through what's new in the Motivational Interviewing 4th edition, helping people change and grow. This webinar presentation is 30 minutes with a 15-minute questions and answer session for those who'd like to participate. I'll be collecting those questions submitted during the presentation and holding them till the end. Additionally, we have some exciting news to share with you after the Q&A, so please stick around for that announcement. And to start, I'm going to kick things off by handing it over to Scott Boyles, the National Training Director at the Train for Change. Scott is a MINT trainer and a licensed addiction counselor. And today he is going to be introducing our guest speaker as well as hosting our Q&A session. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, and good morning to all. I have the great honor to introduce Dr. William Miller. William Miller is Emeritus Distinguished Professor of Psychology and Psychiatry at the University of New Mexico. He introduced motivational interviewing in a 1983 article, and in the first edition of Motivational Interviewing, which is in 1991, with Stephen Rolnick. Dr. Miller's research has focused particularly on the treatment and prevention of addictions and more broadly on the psychology of change. He is a recipient of 2 Career Achievement Awards from the American Psychological Association, the International Jellinek Memorial Award, and an Innovators Award from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, among many, many other honors. His publications include 65, and we need to clarify, is the 4th edition included in that number? So maybe it is 65 books and over 400 articles and chapters. Turn things over to Bill Miller. Welcome.
Thank you. When I submitted that first article describing motivational interviewing to a journal, I didn't know that one of the reviewers was a young fellow named Steve Rolnick. So our relationship in that regard goes back 40 years at this point. And eventually I did meet Steve in Australia, and we wound up writing now 4 editions of this book. So what I want to do is tell you what is new, what's changed in this 4th edition, which just came out this month. It was released about 3 weeks early, as a matter of fact. And each time we have completely rewritten the book, and each time there's at least another 10 years of research to inform what we're doing. So let me get you up to date on what's new in the 4th edition. There we go. Our intention in the 4th edition was to begin to make motivational interviewing simpler. When you understand something well in its complexity, sometimes you can then begin to explain it more simply. And we were inspired by this quote from Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes, Jr., who said, "I wouldn't give a fig," that is, I wouldn't care for simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for the simplicity on the far side of complexity. And that's what we're trying to do in the 4th edition. We've got 40 years of work developing and testing motivational interviewing. And with all that complexity in place, can we more simply explain what's going on, how it works, what it is? The book is indeed 30% shorter than the 3rd edition was, and so that reflects our effort to simplify and to focus on what's really essential in motivational interviewing. We have moved beyond what was the subtitle of the first editions, which was preparing people for change, because now we know that this style of motivational interviewing can be useful throughout the stages of change, throughout the whole journey of change and growth. And we added growth into the title in this 4th edition, because Many people who use motivational interviewing are accompanying people on a much longer journey than just changing a discrete behavior. The teachers and coaches and primary care physicians, for example, accompany people over longer spans of time. And so it's not just making discrete changes, but also developing and growing over that time. A good approach in mentoring as well, and now being applied in leadership and management. And we realize that we're writing now for helping professionals much more broadly. The first edition was just about addictions. It was really for addiction counselors. Then the second edition, by the time that came out, we were writing for a much broader array already, including healthcare and corrections and so on. And that's continued to grow to all kinds of new applications. And so as we were writing the fourth edition, we were conscious that we were writing for an audience much larger than counselors and psychotherapists, although that's still a very important part of the readership. The structure of the fourth edition is, in part one, just kind of an overview of the enterprise of helping people to change and grow, and how motivational interviewing fits into that as a guiding style. Then in part two, we go through the basics of each of the four tasks. And then in part three, we take a deeper dive into those tasks, including cultivating change talk and softening resistance. And then finally, in the fourth part, it focuses on how you learn, teach, and study motivational interviewing. Our definition now, still a little bit broader, is that MI is a particular way of talking to people about change and growth to strengthen their own motivation and commitment. We called these the four processes in the third edition, and they were introduced in the third edition. And they're still the same. We now have called them tasks, which is a somewhat simpler term, but we're still talking about engaging with people. You need to form a trusting relationship with people to be able to move further. Then focusing, coming up with clear shared goals for change and growth. Then with those goals in mind, evoking the person's own motivation for change and growth. And then with sufficient motivation in place to be talking together about how to go about it, with planning the process. So those steps are still the same as they were in the third edition. Some other things we've not changed, the acronym OARS, open questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries, still applies. We tried in the third edition to add a fifth skill of giving information and advice, and it really didn't work because OARS are the way you do that. So we're back to the four key processes or key skills. Change talk and sustain talk are still the same, and we're still talking about preparatory change talk as desirability, reasons, and need. Those are examples of preparatory change talk. And then mobilizing change talk, CATS, if you use the acronym, commitment, activation, and taking steps, or ACTS, as some prefer the acronym. But those are still the same. We're still talking about a guiding style that's located kind of in between giving directions and just following people, and using both of those kinds of skills. Counseling with neutrality is still there. We've said more about it and how to do it well. And we really learned how to remain neutral by learning how to steer people in one direction or another. Because when you choose neutrality as your goal, then you're intentionally not nudging or steering people in one particular direction. And there are particular things that you do in order to avoid, even inadvertently, guiding people in one direction or another. Evoking hope and confidence is still there, so MI is a way to do that. And we still frame resistance as sustained talk and discord. I think two clearer ways of thinking about what's going on when you feel like you're getting pushback from people. The spirit of motivational interviewing is the same, except that we have changed the term evocation to something more general, which is empowerment. So that one piece of this spirit, we've changed the name to broaden it a bit, which with more emphasis on client strengths and abilities, and honoring the client's autonomy, their own right to choose their own way. Debates have grown up over the years about praise versus affirmation, with a kind of overtone of praise is bad, affirmation is good. But I couldn't find any evidence for that exactly. You can certainly overdo praise, and Americans tend to do that. So we use the distinction that Terry Moyers and I came up with in our book, Effective Psychotherapists, between simple affirmation and complex affirmation. Simple affirmations are just commenting on something that the person did well or said well, on their evidence, on their effort, on their intention, something more specific. But it's recognizing steps in the right direction and commenting on those. Complex affirmation expresses appreciation about something that's more enduring about the person, a trait, a characteristic, a strength that they have. And so now you're commenting not so much on behavior as on the person. And so that distinction is there now in the fourth edition as well, with an emphasis on using complex affirmation when you can, just as we emphasize using complex reflection when you can. We've made some changes in terminology in the direction of using more simple everyday language. The technical term agenda mapping, we now talk about as choosing a path forward, choosing the way you want to go. Developing discrepancy, we have a chapter now called planting seeds. When you don't seem to be finding change talk readily, what can you do to begin to plant some seeds, to begin to create some ambivalence, if you will, have the person begin thinking about where they are. The elicit, provide, elicit, we just changed to ask, offer, ask. The idea of clinical formulation, we use the simple term clarifying what's going on. This is when you're working with someone and it isn't even clear what goals there are or what's wrong, and you're trying to find your way through a complex field. The 4 processes of MI are now called 4 tasks. The writing reflex, we chose a simpler term, fixing reflex, your desire to fix things for somebody. And I think that's a little more descriptive of what's going on. And running head start, just a second here, okay. Running head start was actually a misnomer for a particular strategy that we were talking about, in which when you're not finding any change talk, you listen for a while to the person's sustained talk. And now we call that the pendulum approach, because the hope is as you listen to the person's sustained talk, momentum then begins to drift back in the opposite direction, just like a pendulum. We have some new features in the 4th edition. Steve and I have offered a personal perspective commentary at the end of each chapter. So something from our own individual experience that's related to what the chapter is about. Because we're focusing more broadly on helping professionals, we also have boxes called For Therapists, where we use the technical jargon of psychotherapy and things that are likely to be more familiar to behavioral health professionals. We changed our citation style. In the first 3 editions, when we wanted to cite a source, we put in parentheses names and dates, and that's familiar in psychological journals. But it does kind of interrupt the reading. And so now we have used numbering style and put endnotes at the end of each chapter. So the book is still very thoroughly documented. This is still a place you can go to look for more in-depth resources. But rather than interrupting the reading with names and dates, there's just a simple little number there. And you can easily find at the end of the chapter the citations that we're talking about, and sometimes some additional commentary. We've added some new clinical examples that are actual transcripts of video demonstrations done by myself, Terry Moyers, Steve Rolnick, and Carlene Yaney. So these are actual conversations with clients. One new thing that's popped up that we didn't expect 10 years ago is that it looks now like affirmations also tend to evoke change talk. So when you offer an affirmation, the next thing the client is more likely to do is offer some change talk. We knew that about directed questions where you're asking for change talk. We knew that about reflections of change talk and summaries of change talk, but now it looks like affirmation itself also tends to evoke change talk. And we've updated the glossary of MI terms at the end of the book. Also, something else that happened in these 10 years is, thanks in part to the pandemic, people began to provide MI remotely via telephone, chat, video connections, however. And so we discuss some aspects of remote delivery of MI. We put more emphasis on deliberate practice and learning communities as ways of continuing to get better at motivational interviewing, because we know from our own research that just coming to a training on MI, including if I do it or Steve does it, doesn't establish competence in practice. Somehow we started off thinking that if you came to listen to me for 2 days, then you would have competence in practice at the end of that, but it's not true. It takes more practice and ideally some additional guidance from someone else based on observed practice, and not necessarily a lot, but at least some opportunity to have someone observe your practice or have peers observe your practice and together begin to practice the skills more deliberately. We added genuineness or authenticity to the discussion of how to practice MI, and I'll tell you a little later what prompted us to do that. We are emphasizing more the strategic or directional use of ORs when you're evoking. I think sometimes in MI training, people are taught to listen well and follow people, but don't quite get the directional or strategic component of evoking. And so we put more emphasis on that. We talk more about how to offer information and advice in an MI consistent way. And we do that in motivational interviewing, which is just that we do it in a particular way that doesn't raise defenses. And we talk in more detail about how to cultivate change talk and also how to soften sustain talk. And one thing we know from the past 10 years of research is that dealing well with sustain talk is at least as important as evoking change talk. So both of those things are key elements. Now, when I finished the book with Terry Moyers, where we were looking for what is it about therapists that makes them more effective, I was struck by something. I was struck by the overlap between motivational interviewing and what we know about what makes therapists or helpers more effective. We know very well from the work of Bruce Wampold and many others that when you compare two different theoretical orientations of psychotherapy with each other, there's usually no meaningful difference in client outcomes. Even though the theories sound very different, in fact, the outcomes on average are about the same. What does differ is clients' outcomes based on who treated them. And in fact, therapist factors account for more variance in outcome than the particular methods that are being used. And so Terry and I went back through 70 years of psychotherapy research, asking the question, what is it about helpers whose clients get better? And what distinguishes them from therapists on average, or even therapists whose clients get worse? And we came up with these 8 characteristics of more effective therapists, all of which are skills. These are not personality traits, they're not things that you're born with. They're learnable, measurable skills, but these are the things that therapists are doing across schools of psychotherapy that mark more effective outcomes. And as I looked at that list, I said, that looks familiar. That's very similar to what we've been talking about in motivational interviewing for all this time, for 40 years. In fact, the overlap is substantial. Accurate empathy, one of the strongest component of effective therapists, has been foundational in motivational interviewing from the very beginning. Positive regard also has, seen most clearly in affirmation. One that was not there in motivational interviewing before the 4th edition was the characteristic of genuineness or congruence or being yourself, authenticity. And I realized we made a mistake by leaving that out. And so we have now integrated that discussion of effective helping into the 4th edition. Acceptance has always been a key element in the spirit of motivational interviewing. Having a clear focus, having shared goals, knowing where you're going, keeping your eyes on the horizon, and being conscious of moving toward it. That's always been a key process in MI. It's also a characteristic of more effective psychotherapists. Hope, we know that that's a positive predictive factor for clients, but it's also a positive predictive factor for therapists. Therapists who have more hope for their clients are simply more effective. And those who can evoke hope and self-efficacy in clients are evoking something important. Then evocation, the idea of while you're doing therapy or teaching or coaching, whatever you're doing, being very conscious of what your client is doing as well, and arranging the conversation so that the client is more likely to offer you particular kinds of things that are associated with better outcomes. Now, in motivational interviewing, that's more change talk and less sustained talk. In client-centered counseling, it's experiencing. And so are you looking for something in particular, and are you strategically arranging the conversation so that you hear more of that from your clients? And then finally, maybe the smallest effect, but still a positive effect, is offering people information and advice. And I suspect the overall effect is small because it doesn't take into account how you give information and advice, which I think is very related to how readily clients can receive it. So I began to say, and wonder, is this what we've been studying all this time? Is this what we've been practicing and teaching for 40 years? That's been there in the background of motivational interviewing, because MI is not meant to be done instead of other kinds of treatment. You can do MI along with pharmacotherapy, along with cognitive behavior therapy, and so on. And now that's what's being done as I follow the clinical trials. MI is being combined with other treatments normally, rather than used instead of other treatments, which suggests MI can be a way of doing what else you do. It can be a way of doing diabetes education. It can be a way of coaching sports, as Steve Rolnick in his most recent book talked about. It can be a way of doing cognitive behavior therapy, as it has been for me from the very beginning. And do these skills flow together into kind of a way of being? Carl Rogers' very last book was called A Way of Being. And he was seeing this, that the skills he was studying and teaching about, in a way, flow together to become a way of being with the people that you're trying to help. Terms like presence, this is one Rogers was paying attention to toward the end of his life. Your therapeutic presence with people, in a way, combines a number of these key attributes. It gets called responsiveness, paying attention to your client, careful attention to your client, and responding in the moment to what they're doing. Or real relationship, that's another term that's appearing in the psychotherapy literature. So in a way, I'm wondering if motivational interviewing operationalizes how to be a helper across theories, across theoretical orientations. MI is now starting to be used in coaching pretty widely, And the first text on motivational interviewing and coaching is being finished as we speak. So MI can be a way of doing things. It can be a way of doing cognitive behavior therapy. And Sylvie Narr and Steve Safran have a book on that. It can be a way of doing healthcare. Steve Rolnick, that was one of his early contributions to MI. He was working with primary care and specialist care physicians and finding, well, yes, people are ambivalent about making the changes they need to make if they have diabetes or heart disease, and you can help them to make those changes. It is, as I said, a way of doing diabetes education. When I was diagnosed with diabetes about 18 years ago, I was sent to an educator who gave me a 90-minute lecture. And I sat there thinking, I may know a little better way to do this. And so I wrote a book with a diabetologist on using MI in diabetes care. And also now with Don Clifford's book, much more broadly used in nutritional counseling and in fitness counseling. Being used in preventive dentistry and helping people to floss their teeth and brush their teeth and take care of them, which we know also has implications for cardiovascular health. Being used widely in social work and case management as a foundational skills in working with people, even if you don't have advanced degrees yourself. In fact, we found that the ability to learn motivational interviewing is not related to years of advanced education. Way of working with offenders, widely used in probation now. Steve Rolnick's most recent book, as I mentioned, is on using an MI approach, motivational interviewing, in coaching athletes rather than yelling at them. Being used in education, in schools, in the classroom, and being applied now in leadership and management. Most recently, I've been talking to people who are in teaching officers and non-commissioned officers in the Army, motivational interviewing. I thought, drill sergeants, well, motivational interviewing? Well, what they say is, well, we know how to command, but the people under our care, people under our command, have all kinds of things they're dealing with, where giving them orders is not the answer. This is the missing piece. This is something we didn't know how to do to help the people under our command. So this has gone to all kinds of areas that we never envisioned in the beginning. It's wonderful to see, and I think overall the contribution is one of humanizing care, humanizing systems of helping other people. So with that, I'm going to end my presentation. And
thanks for your thoughtful presentation, Bill. And we've had a variety of great questions come in while you were speaking. So we'd like to take the last, 14 minutes to offer some of these questions if you'd like.
Happy, yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna take it from the top. Tanya asked, do you have any suggestions for methadone counseling? I have found that sobriety is not always a goal for them, and I have found it challenging to motivate them.
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone is motivated, okay? Everybody has motivations. There are no unmotivated people. But the question of for what? What are they motivated for? And that's the key thing to find out. What is it that they want? It may be to stay out of jail. MI is very consistent with a harm reduction way of thinking about things. Very different from saying there's one and only one thing you can do to stay sober, and that's this. It's more a menu of options kind of approach, where you're thinking, well, you know, there are many ways to change. There are many ways to go forward, and working with the person to find what they're interested in doing and how they might go about getting there. A prescriptive, you know, ordering, telling people what to do approach doesn't work particularly well with people in general, or with addiction counseling. Helping people to stay with methadone to do what they need to do to be well, I think that's an ideal place for motivational interviewing. MI is not an answer all by itself in treating opiates. I think it's just a part of the puzzle, or a way of doing what else you do, a way of counseling people who are being maintained on opiate substitutes, opiate replacements like buprenorphine or methadone.
Thank you, Bill. I'm just going to kind of keep going down the list so we can cover as many as possible.
Sure.
Arlene says, do you now call it softening resistance, not softening sustained talk?
No, we still don't. We don't use the term resistance without rehabilitating it. That resistance kind of blames the person for not changing, for what they're doing, and that always kind of bothered us. And so we began asking with the third edition, what do we really mean by resistance? And Terry Moyers made the very useful comment to us that most of what we were calling resistance in the first and second editions was just sustained talk. It was just half of people's ambivalence. And of course, people will give voice to their own ambivalence. There's nothing pathological about that at all, or even surprising. But is there more to what therapists mean by resistance than just sustained talk? And there is. And that's where the idea of discord arose. That another thing that you hear is people saying things that are signals that our working alliance isn't going well. And we're not dancing well together. You're stepping on my feet. And that sounds different. I don't want to stop smoking is sustained talk. And you can't make me is discord. Discord often has the word you in it. You're not listening to me. You don't understand me. Who are you to tell me? When you hear that word in you in there, consider the possibility that what you're hearing is discord. It's the person saying, I'm not real comfortable with the way we're working together right now. I feel disrespected or pushed or whatever. And I think it's useful to keep those two ways of thinking about what is happening better than the word resistance. Resistance just kind of inherently blames the person for it. And that's not useful to you or to the client.
So those two pieces, discord and sustained talk.
And we talk about soft and sustained talk, yes.
And just building on that a little bit, a follow-up question, based on your decades of experience, what's your take on our infatuation with the word resistance and external motivation when we're referring to the human beings we work with? I don't know if that's typical, in other settings. I don't believe it is. How did we end up there?
Well, it's common in medicine, certainly, and non-compliant is the term in medicine. And the reason it's appealing to us as helpers is it means it's not our fault if it isn't going well. I was doing my best, I was really working hard, the person just resisted me. Well, what that doesn't take into account is that resistance is interpersonal behavior. There have to be at least two people there for resistance to be happening, each one of whom makes a contribution to it. Now, if a client walks through the door the first time seeming very resistant, that's not my responsibility. But what happens after that is my responsibility. And so I think it's appealing because it kind of takes us off the hook. I'm not involved in the fact that the person's not changing. That's just their resistance. So I understand that being appealing to us as helpers, but it's not good attributionally from the perspective of the client, because if there's success, you as a therapist may want to take credit for it. And if it fails, it's their fault. So that looked good from the helper's perspective, but not so good from the client's perspective. And that was what bothered us about the term resistance.
Okay. And that helper's perspective may not be purposeful or even conscientious at times, but it's almost ingrained to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Monique to verify. Elicit, provide, elicit was removed. This was one of my favorite skills to use and teach to counselors in training. And I think you followed up on that a bit within your presentation, but maybe just to clarify that piece.
Well, first of all, you can continue using whatever you want, but we only renamed it. Instead of elicit, which is not that common a word, ask is more common. And rather than provide, which has some overtones that aren't the best anyhow, offer is kind of more consistent with a guiding style. So it's just ask, offer, ask, but it's still there as a central component, particularly when providing information and advice. So hadn't changed, just renamed.
All righty. Mike, this a little more, Mike's a trainer. So Mike says, can you help clarify the supporting autonomy within empowerment and respecting autonomy related to acceptance within the spirit of MI? Is this simply integration within spirit?
Yeah, no, it's the same idea, which somehow is a hard one sometimes for helpers to get in their head, that people will make their own choices. They will decide if they're going to, take their medication or whatever it is. That's not our choice to make. And not only recognizing, but in a way affirming and applauding that is an important piece in motivational interviewing. It is part of the spirit, and spirit is where we're now talking about empowering as well, as a broader concept than just evoking things from people, that we recognize, affirm, support people's making their own choices. And that's just telling the truth, by the way. It's not something radical, but it was something we were reluctant to do, particularly in the addiction field, where we said things like, you can't let alcoholics decide, you can't let alcoholics choose. Well, how do you take that away from people? I mean, you can't. So recognizing that you're working with someone who makes their own choices and will make their own choices, and who can disregard what you have to say, is part of it being okay with you. And ironically, acknowledging that people can disregard what you say makes it more possible for them to hear it. So that's been a central element in spirit, and thereby in the practice of MI for a very long time.
And Bill, to just maybe add to that a little bit, you brought up the term empowerment, which was a change. So some people may struggle with that concept, as if we're installing power to the person, or like we're giving it to them. And can you help just maybe elaborate a little bit more on the context of that and the more thinking behind it?
Whoever offered that, great question, and we directly address that, because a way of misunderstanding what we mean is that you're giving people something they didn't have to begin with. Empowering, for example, can mean giving somebody authority that they didn't previously have. That is not what we mean. We mean by empowering, helping people to realize, be aware of, and use the resources that they do have. So it's not that you're providing something they didn't have before, it's that you're connecting them with their own power to direct their lives and to make changes and to grow in directions that they want to grow. Both of those are meanings in the dictionary, but the one that says I'm giving them something I didn't have before is not what we mean. And we do, at the very outset of discussing the term, explain that in the 4th edition.
Great. And I guess kind of overall with the theme of motivational interviewing, that we know there's something there that we're bringing forward, and that's fairly consistent with that piece also.
That's still very much a part of the view of empowering, that you're calling forth from people their own motivation. You're not trying to install motivation. You're trying to call forth what's already there and resources that are already there, and empower them to use that motivation and resources that they already have. Now, that doesn't mean you can't provide additional skills or additional resources. You certainly can when those seem to be needed. But the overall approach is one of honoring people's strengths, wisdom, self-regulation.
And thanks for following up on that piece. It looks like we have a grand total of 3 minutes left, and I know Michelle has some closing comments, but before we turn things back over to Michelle, Bill, do you have any final things that you would like to share?
I'm just grateful that that this approach, which I think does humanize care, has spread so far and wide. I mean, there are at least 70 languages in the world now where this is being taught and practiced. It's crossed into so many helping professions. I'm amazed and grateful that this work that began long ago just in the field of addiction seems to be useful in so many languages and places now.
Thank you, and a complete understatement, but thank you for everything you've brought to the field of helping others. It's just, again, it's an understatement to describe what you and Stephen Rolnick have done with motivational interviewing. So thank you for that. I will turn things back over to Michelle for closing remarks.
I just want to thank both of you for your time today. And Bill, it's always wonderful when we can hear from you directly of what's happening in the world of MI. And Scott, you did such a great job of moderating questions and kind of furthering discussion. I also want to make a plug for Scott, who is a great, phenomenal trainer at Train for Change. And so if you are ever looking for additional MI live training in a variety of different areas within your organization, Scott and his team at Train for Change are exceptional and would be willing and loving to work with your organizations in that area. Additionally, I know I mentioned that we have a few announcements. As many of you are aware, our Fidelity platform is a comprehensive collection of useful resources offering on-demand training sessions, micro-learning modules, and a wealth of content tailored to enhance your facilitation skills, including the practice of motivational interviewing. In addition, we are excited to share that in collaboration with William R. Miller and Scott Boyles, we've produced an insightful collection of new videos that illustrate key concepts from the 4th edition. And the series encompasses 5 demonstration interviews where individuals candidly discuss an array of issues or topics that they're working through. And you can look also forward to debrief discussions between Scott and Bill, designed to delve deeper into those kind of specific ideas within Motivational Interviewing 4th edition. So make sure to mark your calendars for September 1st as the official release date of the MI 4th edition video series on our Fidelity platform. And if you have any specific questions about that, you can learn more by giving us a call at 888-889-8866. Or you can visit our website at changecompanies.net. As a reminder to everyone that attended, you will also be receiving a link to access the recording of this presentation, as well as a wonderful handout that Bill himself has put together for you to kind of have at your disposal when you're looking at the new 4th edition. And Bill, I did have a general question. Would you like to share the date and the release of the 4th edition so everyone attending knows when they will be able to access their publications?
It's already out. It came out 3 weeks early, so the original release date was August 23, and my copy came a week ago, so that's available. I'd say it's been such a pleasure to work with the Change Companies for more than 10 years now, beginning to integrate motivational interviewing into all the materials that you provide, and that's been a great pleasure for me.
Yes, very much the same for us as well. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, till next time, thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.